check. All right, man. Not gonna be with you long. Brother Moses here. This is more or less going to be a three-part conversation that I'm going to have. The conversation will be towards the end. But as you know, accepted the challenge to start trying to create content, still working through what it takes to actually create that content, learning the back end processes, sending links out and things like that. So I sent a link to my brother George Macon, who I'll be joining a little bit later for a conversation. But on this presentation, I do have some information that I will be bringing out. On this conversation, we will be discussing a reviewer's request or a subscriber's request. Yo, hey, I finally got to 2 screens. So Third Degree Burns, appreciate you for joining, man. But a subscriber sent me an article, and I don't agree with most of the content that's inside of it, but it was so well put together. I will be going over it. So that's what I'll do for the second part. Discussion at the end. The second part will be the kind of review of this article. You got to see it, how it came through the email. It is my first one, so congrats to that and salute that person for bringing that information to me. And then for the first part, I just wanted to provide a little bit of content for those who love to talk about a simp. Here you go.
You see, because she is a beautiful woman, something that you'll be a fool to resist. When you see her, it's like sunshine. You ever dream of having sunshine when you wake up? Sunshine in your lunchtime? Sunshine at night? That's my lady. As beautiful as she is, though, she's not yours. She's just a piece of your fantasy for a short amount of time. You love her, you caress her, you take care of her, but she ain't yours. She mine, boy. She mine. I manage her. I just hope you don't damage her. Let me tell you about my lady. Cute face, thin waist, quick taste. What she really loves is your pocket, boy. You can do everything in your mind to try to please my lady and take my lady from you. But at the end of the day, guess what? She's bringing your check. That's my lady.
They named the movie My Lady.
You're welcome. All right, man. So let's go on and get into it, man. So the second part of this, that's as promised. The guy starts the email, or the lady, I'm not sure, but it is one of those areas. They said, "What up, brother Moses? Congrats on your first live stream. I would like for you to have a live stream about the reverse migration of Black Californians to the South. Please review my article, Why Now is the Best Time for Black Californians to Move Back to the South. Feel free to read it and discuss it on air. If you live stream the show after 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I would call in and add my commentary. My apologies there, sir, Mr. Ray Alexander. It will not be after 8 p.m., but we can revisit this conversation and kind of go into it because, as you will find out, I do disagree. But I do thank you for sending it, and I will do it live and review your content right now because you were the first subscriber to actually send me this type of feedback, and I appreciate you. This should be something to incentivize other folks who do have great content or great content ideas. You may not want to be a YouTube content creator or a social media influencer yourself, but you do feel like you got a great opinion. And so the reason why I'm sharing this is because it was so well put together and it was so thought out. Some of the areas that I do like to look at when I'm looking at content, it almost aligned with the way that I think. Now, I disagree, but it's a good start. So starts it off as we see here. Let me try to expand it just a little bit so we can see it. And it shouldn't be long. I do got brother George Macon, who will be going live a little bit later, who I agreed to, join him. And so let's just see what he has to offer. All right, a very nice image there. I like that. So he says, why now is the best time for Black Californians to move back to the South? Shows us a picture of Huntsville, Alabama, Space City, USA. And then he also has a link to the blog. So that's number one call out, is have the links there. And that way, when we're reviewing the content, we're able to go through it. Now, let's get into the opinion piece. So, this person does have a blog and a very, very well-spoken tone inside of the blog. Says over half a century ago, waves of Black Americans migrated from the Jim Crow South to escape blatant racial discrimination as well as political and economic disenfranchisement, and they resettled to California for a better life. California was the golden state at the time, and it offered ambitious Black Americans opportunities to work in auto, aerospace factories, in unions as longshoremen at the ports of Los Angeles and Oakland, and as an emerging group of professionals in education and healthcare, as well as small business owners serving the needs of their communities. I wish he would have said our right there, but let me keep going. The Black Great Migration participants that moved west from the 1940s to the 1970s were outliers who recognized a time and a place of new opportunities and proactively moved on to greener pastures. Now will the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the Great Migration generation recognize that their best social and economic opportunities are no longer in California, but in the New South? Great image here that he puts of Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles, California. Very, very interesting and peculiar here. So I definitely want to shout that out. Also has a link to NBC News story here when they're talking about the rats and the trash and the infestation. I think what it's looking at is the homeless and the tent shelters and all of that. So a good call out there. Why it's time for Black Californians. Hey, Nyla News and Reviews. Love that channel. George Macon. Yes, sir. I'll see you in a minute. Goes on to say why it's time for Black Californians to return south. I like when he pivots that he puts it in bold. So I know that there's going to be a pivot there. So he says California is no longer, hey, Charze, California is no longer the golden state. The gold is turned to pewter. Guess which state has the highest poverty rate in the country? Not Mississippi, New Mexico, or West Virginia, but California, where nearly 1 out of 5 residents is poor. That's according to the Census Bureau Supplemental Poverty Measure, which factors in the cost of housing, food, utilities, and clothing, and which includes non-cash government assistance as a form of income. Further contributing to the poverty problem in California's housing crisis. More than 4 in 10 households spent more than 30% of their income on housing in 2015. A shortage of available units has driven prices even higher, far above income increases. Middle-income households have been forced to accept lower standards of living, while the less fortunate have been driven into poverty by the high cost of housing. That's crazy, brother. They just gonna be kicking the brother off, man. I got the Queen my mobile right now, man. And I paid that phone bill. Something's funny with the church's money, but let's keep it rocking. It says California, with 12% of the American population, is home to about 1 in 3 of the nation's welfare recipients. So the biggest welfare state. That's interesting. And then he puts down another source. Why is liberal California the poverty capital of America? LAtimes.com op-ed discussing California poverty looks like 2018. So not too far back. And then when you're looking at census, it's probably one of the most recent for data. So good call out there. So up to this point, I have no disagreement. There's poverty there. There's a lot of liberalism there. There's homelessness there, the housing market, and all of those different things. But shall we continue? And California's 3 million illegal immigrants unfairly compete for and access jobs that would typically be available to unemployed and underemployed Black Californians. And you know, he and I would have to have a conversation about that. Unauthorized immigrant population in California, 3,059,000, according to migrationpolicy.org. All right. The Black population of California at only 4.6% is overwhelmed in a state with 3.9 or 39.5 million people, where Hispanics make up nearly 39% and where Asians make up nearly 15%. Hopefully that audio came back in once I came back. What up, Great Black Shark? Additionally, while the Black population of California remains stagnant, the Hispanic and Asian populations are increasing, and so is their political power. Furthermore, when the current 3 Black California congressional representatives, Democrats Barbara Lee of Oakland, as well as Karen Bass and Maxine Waters, both of Los Angeles, retire or lose their seats in an election, it is highly unlikely that Blacks remaining in California will have Black representation in the U.S. Congress again. So why remain in a losing game? Now is the time for Black Californians to strategically and proactively move back south. And by the way, the new South is not the South of your grandparents, and that is where he and I would butt heads. He says, and I'll repeat it one more time, by the way, the new South is not the South of your grandparents. See, I can understand why he said their community instead of our. So because now you said it's their community, you've told me that you don't identify as being a part of the Black community. So I'll just say it then. Nigga, please. That's the same old South. And that's where we would disagree. But I'm going to go on because it's so well put together. I like the images. I like the links. And it's linear. It's now a place with diverse job opportunities, more affordable housing, and distinctive Southern Black culture that our Black ancestors sacrificed and blessed America with. Boy, that would put it on thick, didn't he? Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I thought you told me to move to Alabama. What are you showing me North Carolina for? But I've been to Winston-Salem. I love North Carolina. And that would be one of my contentions. If I was to move anywhere down south, why in the fuck would I choose Alabama? And hopefully he has something in here about Alabama that tells me why Alabama. But that's just not the case for me, man. Alabama. Only thing that I would do in Alabama is go see Roll Tide. And that's about it. Is the young HBCU football phenoms that are busting heads and making it to the NFL. That would be about the only thing that actually draws me there. But then again, I don't know. There's a lot. So let's keep it going. He says, the New South, the region ranked the best place to live in America. And then he puts the Bureau of Labor Statistics .gov region Southeast. So another source that I commonly use. I definitely thank him for that. And in my rebuttal, I will stick to some of the sources that he uses as my counterpoints. But we won't go into it right now. I just wanted to appreciate him and show that love for actually presenting some quality information to present. He goes on to put in quotes, U.S. News and World Report recently released its annual list of the 50 best places to live in America, comprising the metro areas with the perfect combination of affordability, a good job market, and quality of life. While every geographic region in the U.S. was represented on the list, it's the South that seems to have come out on top for the third year in a row. The U.S. Census Bureau definition of the South includes 16 states and Washington, D.C. The region had 20 cities in the top 50, more than any other, including the city that received the highest marks, Austin, Texas. But it wasn't just the typical Southern hotspots like Austin, Atlanta, and Nashville that put the South over the edge this year. This year also saw 4 new Southern cities added to the list: Huntsville, Alabama, Lexington, Kentucky, Asheville, North Carolina, and Fort Myers, Florida. U.S. News and World Report used 5 criteria: job market, value, quality of life, desirability, and net migration to definitively rank these major metro areas. And then he put that top 20 list in there. Good job. Then he puts as an asterisk the U.S. Census Bureau's American South and lists the states that are included. Goes on to another pivot. He says, it's time to sell those overpriced Cali houses and purchase homes in the South debt-free. On this, I would disagree. I mean, I would kind of be on the fence. I'm not saying sell your home in the South, but if you know that that is an emerging hotspot for Asians and Mexicans, why would you even sell it? I know you may have the equity that you have in it, and all of those different things may give you a good starting position in moving to the South, but we'll get into it. I won't go into my rebuttal just yet, but don't sell it. But if you want to, if you decide to migrate to the South, I'm not in disagreement there. And if you decide that you would like property in the South, I'm not in disagreement there. But Alabama, nah, man, I'll go so much further on my rebuttal round. But Southern living in Lithonia, Georgia. Now that is the truth. Big old house right here we see on this image here that he provides. Something like this is probably $800-900 a month. Like it kills it. It kills the game. At most $1,400, just depending on where it's located. But Lithonia, yeah, you could probably get that bad boy for like $900 a month. So that's cool. So I'm rocking with him, and I'm rocking with him because it's a well put together presentation. He goes on to say a little bit more. When middle-class white Californians are selling their homes and leaving the state in droves for greener pastures in more affordable regions, it's clear that it's also time for Black Californians to make their strategic and proactive exodus to a better life, just like their grandparents and great-grandparents did more than half a century ago when they left the Jim Crow South. It's time for Black Californians to sell those overpriced homes that took decades to pay for and use the profits to purchase homes and investment rental properties in the New South for themselves and their progeny debt-free. In the next few decades, the small enclaves of Blacks in California will be overwhelmed by Latino and Asian immigrant communities, and the political climate will turn against the Black interests. It's already happening with Latino politicians gunning for congressional and state legislative seats that Black politicians currently occupy. It's already happening with gentrification into formerly predominantly Black neighborhoods and suburbs. Looks at Inglewood, definitely like that, and goes into how the new stadium deal impacted those neighborhoods. Same thing you can say is happening right there in Atlanta, Georgia. And then he goes on to say, it's time for Black Californians to get out now get out now ahead of the fallout. Don't wait out a losing game, and don't set up your children or your grandkids for third-class citizenship in a Hispanic and Asian dominated California. It's time for Black Californians to embrace the New South and return to the land and Southern roots of their Black American ancestors to reclaim it and make it the good and just beloved community that the civil rights generation fought for. Closes it out with what gentrification and the new NFL stadium mean for long-term Black residents of Inglewood, California. And so that was what was sent to me inside of my inbox. I do respect it. I respect the caliber of it. I think that it also speaks to and I don't know if it's something about myself, but when we approach this material and we're looking for content that is actually going to add some rich value to the discussions that we have every day anyway. Oh, Shay, what up, Elder? And to add some rich value, I think there's some key takeaways there. And one of the key takeaways that I would like to go into, and in about 5:15, I think Brother George Macon will be joining us. But you know what I want to do right now? I actually want to drop the link inside the chat in case there is anyone there who would like to join and kind of chime in on this opinion piece. This is a blog by one of the subscribers, and I can't say exactly where they have found us, but it's most likely from either Nyla Says, most likely 90% sure that it may be someone who follows Nyla Says channel, or Taz Exclusives, or O'Shea Duke Jackson. Other than that, I haven't mastered that marketing and social media marketing yet to be able to reach out to even my own network and my own email base. And so not sure where they found it, but this is what they wanted to present. I've presented the information without too many rants in between, although I did drop a couple of tidbits of my own perspective there. But I want to call out a couple of the sections that stood out as my key takeaways. All right, so scrolling back up to the top. Congrats. Number one, although it was a long email, because it was well put together, I like the sizing and I like the spacing. I definitely am filling the pictures inside of an email. It made it a lot easier just to scroll through. Number two, I like that the paragraphs only have about 1 or 2 sentences each. That way, when I'm going through it, it's the key takeaways and not a lot of the ranting that I would normally fill it in with. And so it was more concise than it even needed to be. He could have expounded in a couple of areas. Major takeaways, though. Number one that we're going to have to critique is whether or not the Jim Crow South is over. Whether or not there's been some changes to the Jim Crow South. That would be number one call out. Do you actually believe that the South is a richer and a more opportune location for political, economic, and social activism or social change? And that's going to be up for debate. There's different areas where you can, different pockets, as you might be able to look at them. Hey, JV, oh my God, I didn't even know that you knew that I existed in this world, let alone that you knew where my channel was. So shout out to you, sis. I do watch your content as well. So I consume your content. I don't just watch it. I consume this shit. I take this content to the water cooler. And if I ever had the guts to actually speak about what I did at work, I'm still on the fence about that, because you know how they be. You say anything about work, and next thing you know, they're using it against you in an HR meeting or in your mid evaluation. So I kind of try to separate work, but I do bring pro-Black perspectives to the water cooler with me. I am a part of one of those affinity networks where brothers do come together and have meaningful conversations every once in a while about what's going on outside of work. And so I definitely benefit from having a connection to the B1 network and Black spaces on YouTube. It's all I really consume. Sometimes it's sports, but even more than sports, I think it's only second to music. So there it is. Number one call out, though, Jim Crow South. The Jim Crow South, to me, has not died, that it still operates, and even worse, the most blatant and outright militia groups still operate right outside of some of these key cities you're referring to, like the Atlantas. The militia groups are very well armed, big military trucks that they get off, them government auctions and shit, big trucks, big Confederate flags, big proud. I mean, big proud, as Taz or George Macon or myself would love to see African-American men, big proud, waving that Confederate flag as big as they want. They go to the game, they go to the tailgates, they'll join right along with you. And I think they're similar. Many of them are similar to us. They will sit out there in the tailgate with their Confederate flag outside of their trunk, having beers and drinking and having a good time right alongside Negroes, because they know what they believe in and they're passionate about what they believe in, and fuck what you think if you have a problem with it. And I'm pretty much on those same lines. I'm not anti-white. I just think Black folks got enough work to work on and to focus on than to really be fucking around with the bullshit. But with that being said, the Jim Crow South has not left. The ownership class has not left, and we will continue to have to fight those battles. So if your argument might be that coming together and trying to create this beloved community will require those folks who have lived in those distant spaces and been scattered to other parts of America, and them coming back can add some value, then we can have that conversation. But just to say the premise that it's the old South has died, I would beg to differ right there. I would say that you have to prepare people to know that they are for a battle of their life, that old South is still the old South, and that they are still armed and dangerous and ready to burn down whatever they can to kill, steal, and destroy, and rape, and pillage. That Obamacare probably benefited them because their poor outnumber our poor, even in those southern spaces, and their poor have done a wonder, have done a phenomenal wonder on institutionalizing what poverty means to them, so that they could be of a benefit to poverty, while our poverty, we just suffer in poverty. It'd be 13, 14, 15 of us in a 2-bedroom, suffered through poverty, but they've been able to weaponize their poverty in order to get the biggest gains from it. And so that's what I would say. And that would also be the counter argument. When you look at California, the cost of living is higher, as you've pointed out. And those African Americans who may be suffering at the bottom, I don't know where you would get the statistic to show what is the actual benefit of these social safety net programs for African Americans in California. What percentage do they actually make? Because when you put out the blanket statement that, California is so bad with all of the, the homelessness rate, for me, in order to say Black people need to leave, you need to draw a distinct correlation between the Black people suffering the most in these Skid Row places. Now, I'm from Northern California, and I laugh at the motherfuckers in Los Angeles and Skid Row homeless rates and all of that shit. Maybe the veterans may get a slight chuckle, but I laugh because, if, as you know, Northern California don't. They playing me, bruh. Why they doing that to the kid? Man, I got that good internet too. Anyway, here's what I'm gonna do here. Nah, we don't need to share the screen. Oh, wait. Yeah, don't share the screen for a second. Man, and until I get all of this shit fixed, I still feel a little bit conscientious about this shit. But believe it or not, I have lived with a missing tooth my entire life for the most part. Everybody know it. Like, you know how you describe motherfucker, oh, you know, Jink, nigga, tall nigga, skinny nigga. Always been Mo, nigga with the tooth, nigga snags. And so it's just something I've always known. So I don't really give a fuck as much, but I do know image is something. And in order to expand in these social spaces, people do look at the image and say, oh, look what the nigga look like. The roasting, oh, we could do that all day. But in any event, where was I at? Oh, Northern California doesn't really fuck with Southern California. And so while I might be able to look at it and say, damn, that's fucked up, they're homeless, damn, that's fucked up, they're barely making ends meet. At the same time, we all know that there are other areas inside of this big ass country where people can live and survive for a lot less, on a lot less. And because of that, I laugh sometimes. I laugh, and I don't laugh sometimes. I laugh all the goddamn time. I find humor in some of the darkest shit, I promise you. But you would have to draw a correlation between African American poverty. What up, sis? You would have to draw a correlation between African American poverty in California to make that connection for me. You can't just tell me, oh, blacks in California have it so bad. And that's the reason why blacks should leave California. Oh, the price of rent is so high, and that's why you should just leave California. You're gonna have to dig in a little bit deeper than that for me. But I definitely like it. I definitely understand, and I wanted to draw some attention to that. But oh yeah, California, with 12% of the American population, is home to about 1 in 3 of the nation's welfare recipients. So that's interesting, right? Because when you go to the Deep South, that welfare recipient is different than a California welfare recipient. I'm gonna say that one more again. Poverty in California is different than poverty inside of the South. It is just different. And the social safety networks that are there, the churches or the infrastructure, the homeless shelters, the where can I get food if I'm hungry, where can I go if I need anything, the system that allows for people who are at their lowest, at the bottom, to survive a little bit easier day to day. And I'll tell you like this. If I had to be, and this is real talk, and you might call it petty, fuck y'all, I'm petty as shit. If I had to be homeless, would I rather be homeless in LA or homeless in Huntsville, Alabama? I just don't see how you get that point. I don't see how that goes to Alabama. I don't see how, if you had to be homeless in LA or homeless in Alabama, which one would you prefer? So if you're talking about the homeless rate, now the welfare folks, that's one step up from being the bottom of the barrel. Now you're begging without a sign. You're begging with an application. You put in that application, right? And that application says that you're going to have to try to find jobs and things. So the thing that I would have to look at here as a kind of rebuttal would be, if you had even the minimal chance, minimum wage, what does minimum wage look like in California versus minimum wage in Alabama? Because again, you're talking about, when I take it that you're talking about those people who are almost at the bottom of the barrel, for the most part. This is the statistics that you're giving me, and this is where we would draw a disconnect. See, in one end, when you deliver me this information, you're talking about why California is bad. You're talking about welfare recipients, and let's get past all the illegal immigrants. All of that shit can be a distraction. But when we get to the bottom, you're talking about, now sell your homes, cash out all that equity, and move to the South debt free. So the issue that I would have is, I think we're talking about two different audiences. You feel me? And this is why that's important. I don't see you building a beloved community when you're in the grassroots phases. I don't see you building that beloved community with people who are homeless or on welfare. I see you building that beloved community with those folks who had at more towards the bottom bought the home, they got equity inside of their home, and maybe even at the point of retirement. I see the audience who you're speaking to. So here you go, right here. This is what I'm talking about. It's time for Black Californians to sell those overpriced homes that took decades to pay for and use the profits to purchase homes. So it doesn't connect with me if you're saying, oh, welfare is so bad, homelessness is so bad. And now you're talking about people who own a home. Does that kind of make sense there? So if your appeal will be towards those people who already own a home, they may have some equity. They may be, that's to me saying, you said it took decades to pay it off. I know you're not talking about me. It definitely can't be the 30 somethings who took decades to pay off a home. So really let's drill down on who you're referring to. You must be talking about my mama. Nigga, you talking about my mama and you're not even Black? You gonna say their community? You're saying my mom needs to leave California. So my mom, when we first got there, my dad was military. So we came from Germany. I was around 6 years old. And we got to Northern California. And my grandmother took us in. And just like I said, the testimony, 13, 14 poor people. My dad got out of the military. We lived on my grandmother's land in that small ass 1-2 bedroom. It was really like 1.5. That motherfucker was so little, y'all. That little bathroom is like what you have a washer and dryer in. You couldn't put a washer and dryer in that bathroom. It was just the bathroom with the toilet and the sink and a little bit of walk area in it. You couldn't put like a cabinet on the wall. That bathroom was so small. But it was 13 of us in there. That poverty. But we did pretty good. Oh, there you go, Brother George. I see you. And it's 5:16, man. Way to keep me honest. Let me add you to the stream. And I got to give you a warning in advance. I don't know what it is, whether it's my internet or what, but they are turning me. I'm like in, and then it'll kick me out. Then I'm in, and it'll kick me out. What's going on, big bro?
Nothing. I was watching. He was going black. The screen was going black, and he was coming back and forth. You know what's funny? When I was listening, you remember because we was on the live streams together. Remember all last year I was talking about if we was going to move south. Some of the states that we should look at is Alabama and Mississippi because those states are like damn near double the size of Pennsylvania. When Pennsylvania has 12 to 13 million people, you look at a state like Alabama, which is huge. It only has 4 million people in the whole state. And I looked at the land, but I was when we were having those conversations, it was based off of us going down in mass droves. Like if we had to leave Chicago, Philadelphia, Cali, I looked at Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana because Louisiana, as big as that boot is, it's only 6 million people in the whole state. Mississippi is only 4 million in the whole state. Pennsylvania got 13 million people.
Packed on top of each other.
Packed on top of each other, right? And it's inside the cities. But when you ride through the state, it ain't nothing but open land. So you
think it's open, but that shit don't be open. The motherfuckers own that shit still.
They own it. Yeah, they own it. It's just it's open land for miles that's owned by white folks. But yeah, when you go like to Alabama and places like that, it's open land. But it would have to be large numbers of us moving down there and already with money to build.
That's what I'm saying. So as long as his audience isn't fucked up, like, yeah, there are homeless and people who are on welfare who would be a part of the beloved community, but he's talking about building. So the mass exodus, and once you get there, the actual people that you would need to actually build that beloved would be that beloved community would be those people who are in a position to sell that home and things. So that it was just, for me, the data wasn't lining up. You're giving me information. For me, what would have been better is give me information about how many Black homeowners there are in those Los Angeles areas or inside of California. What is the value of their properties that they would be selling? Now, what is the collective value that they would bring to Alabama? What if only 10% of them went? What would that collective value be? Now, what would their purchasing power be if it was only 10% of them? What is their purchasing power equivalent? That would have been the data that I needed, not homelessness and welfare state.
And it would have to be if our ancestors 50 years ago made the migration from the south to the north, we cannot be going back to the south and worse or dire straits than we was when our ancestors left. We can't be going back asking the government for a goddamn handout after the sacrifice that our ancestors made to even come to the north, into these cities, to get jobs over generations, where we can go to school and fight for integration, so we can be able to compete and do certain things. If we're going back to the South worse off than we was before we came, then we in trouble. If you talk about going back, like if we was to go back to this, if we just had the Great Black Shark in the chat, if we had to go back to the South right now, like, man, we in fucking trouble, Moses.
You're right.
What are we going back? What are we
definitely got to come back in ownership class status, not in some regular, I need the government to continue to provide services and things.
Right. What are we going back to Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi with, Louisiana with? What are we going back with? You know. So yeah, but I believe that if we had the resources to go back and build, we would flourish in the South. The weather number one is better for us. And I just think that we can build our own cities down there, but we would have to be. I mean, you can't just go down there and just regular black people just going down Alabama like that, like Mississippi like that. No, we need to go down in numbers, but we need to have economics. Your volume went out. Your volume went out. You muted yourself.
My bad. I said the tens would be good, the hundreds would be better, and the thousands would be damn near perfect. You don't need the 10,000 movement mass exoduses like we saw in previous times, especially not at one time. But the tens, that's only one family. The hundreds is about maybe 3 or 4 families if you really get big, but 10 families at the most. I mean, not at the most, but 10 families. It just depends on the size of the family, maybe 4, but oftentimes it's cousins, sisters, things like that would join you as well. But the thousands is the real numbers where you can actually impact a broader change. So then I'm trying to show these, but I cannot get them to come up. Give me 1 second. Can you speak for a second while I try to work on this?
Yeah, because I was reading that Texas is actually the state with the largest amount of African Americans. Austin is the largest growing city in the country. So this is when I look at Texas, I believe like the South is areas that we should be looking to actually build on in different cities and stuff like that. Yeah, and I always talked about when it was about reparations. I wanted us to have land in certain states, especially southern states where we were actually slaves in. States like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia. Certain parts of land should be allocated to us with resources for us to build and be able to compete. I mean, it's more than just a check in the bank. I mean, if our ancestors picked those cotton fields, or they worked in Tobacco Road here in the Carolinas, or those cotton fields in Mississippi, then we should be afforded land, or land should be allocated to us in those lands where our ancestors were actually enslaved, that created the economic surplus for America. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's the way I see it. So you look at Alabama, you look at Alabama's cotton fields, Mississippi cotton fields, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tobacco Road. You got damn right. Because when it come down to the wars, we fought in every war on both sides of the war. Moses, we was having a conversation on the phone. We fought on both sides of these wars. We fought with the British and we fought with the so-called patriots in order to establish America. And me and Moses, we're gonna have an actual live stream coming with that, where we break down some of the black soldiers that was instrumental in the Revolutionary War, of history that we don't even know about, that they don't even tell you. So these things are important when we talk about when a man like this sends these type of emails to you, and I don't think that we really fully got a historical grasp on like what's really at play when you talk about going back to the South and dealing with our people in the South. Man, when we got like going back to Mississippi and Alabama, after we had to fled because of Jim Crow and Plessy versus Ferguson, and now we talking about reparations in this ADOS, I don't think that people really understand what our people went through in Alabama and Mississippi. We can't go back to Alabama and Mississippi without our just due.
All right, man. What time does your show start? 5:30?
8:30, yeah. About another 6-7 minutes.
All right. So what I'll do, I'll just close out with a worldview, perspectives. And so here's how I typically think with analysis. The first thing that I'm going to look at on a global scale, right? Because I can't afford to think so small as to my own personal influence in my own personal spaces. If you do have the If you're looking on the right, so here's what he was showing me, and it's very zoomed in when he was looking at California. And then he's looking at Inglewood, and he's like, well, gentrification is happening in places like this. But I think he's talking about a bigger issue, Brother George. And so he showed me this one as well. I look at it from this view. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you're actually looking at Los Angeles. You see the mountains in the back here. I actually live this way towards Phoenix, Arizona. But you see all of the mountains and all of the land that's rich and right and available. And so as you look at it, you'll start seeing little roads and different things. I'm going to zoom in. This is the downtown area that he's referring to, and he's referring to the homelessness. But everything else that you see out here are houses. And he's talking about 36% of what California is Mexican, and Mexicans are inside of all of these millions and millions of households, which is why it's important for him to actually show me the depreciating value of those homes that African Americans live in. And so number one, I think on a global scale, the thousands and thousands, if not millions of people who are of African American descent or American descendants of slavery who live inside of this big ass space, what would be the benefit for all of them to up and leave? Would it even leave a mark? What would it look like? And what would be the outcome? And so I zoom in a little bit more just to show you that it gets even smaller than that. You don't need a whole world view. Let's look in a little bit closer and just see what you're talking about, the interconnected roads and resources that allow commerce and trade to operate more efficiently. Now, we know traffic sucks. So along that top mountain line that I showed you, there's a long major artery. Now, that's important, right? Because it gets you to the hubs where you actually need to compete for. If you're going to be talking about building the beloved community, you better be talking about having an economic base. And if your economic base isn't in the tons, then you're not talking to me yet. You're just not doing it. If your whole premise is to leave this and to go to Alabama, you're going to have to show me the network of Alabama. What does it actually look like? How does it connect to the major arteries that feed the world? So I zoom in a little bit more because this was the focus of his conversation once again, was the homelessness and the tent cities and all the filth and decay that's right there in the financial district. And so I'm still showing you even the financial district. It took me this many times to zoom in on how small that is. I mean, it's big, but we don't own none of that shit. None of it. Not in California, not in Los Angeles, and definitely not in Alabama. So zooming in on one individual household or one unit inside of these apartment complexes or these sky rises and saying there's an African American who lives there who's more affluent. They make over 6 figures. Why should the person who works in any of these tall buildings move to Alabama and get a restart? Why should somebody who's spent their entirety of their livelihood growing up here and now has found a job here decide to uproot to Alabama of all places? Maybe they were just saying the South. So I zoom in further and show you that out of all of these buildings, this is what we're competing on when you're talking about building a beloved community. If your beloved community's vision is not to have skyscrapers that can occupy your businesses and your products and things and ship them on an international scale, then you're not talking yet. You're not quite there yet. You're not the visionary. We know right here in America that all of these are white owned. They are part of the system. They're integrated in and throughout the system, from finance to insurance to real estate. All of those different things, both businesses are operating out of these sky rises, and they employ everybody who works inside of them on all of these floors and all of these windows and all of these offices. Now, our argument is it took us this long to get a nigga up here in the first place, and now you're telling me to leave here and go to sweet home Alabama. You're going to have to give me a little bit more than that. So I back out again and show you a worldview that you are just one small dot on the map. And if you haven't locked in what your true audience is, this is a town view. So are you talking about the people in Compton should leave? Are you talking about the people in Los Angeles? No, just the people in Pasadena. The African Americans should give up Pasadena. No, the African Americans need to give up Long Beach and move to Alabama. Imagine going to Long Beach and saying, y'all brothers need to pack it on up and move to Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. These motherfuckers like, nigga, I'm not going to Huntington Beach, let alone a Huntsville, Alabama. So it's going to be a hard sell unless you come with some real data and statistics. This is the map that most people are familiar with, which is just the streets and roads, showing you that there is a bigger picture here. And then once again, I just wanted to highlight it that there is the Chinatown. So you're asking them to give up their dreams of ever having a black town there in Los Angeles. And look how close it is to the financial district. They don't want a black town. Stop fighting for a black town and go create a black town in Alabama. Inside of your message, you're going to have to get a little bit deeper for me to actually connect with you on that. But again, I do appreciate it. This is the street view, again, that you're asking me to look from and see the individual household and the benefits from an individual leaving leaving Los Angeles and moving to Alabama. And again, I think that it's a hard sell to tell somebody who feels like they're top shit because they live up here in a very nice gentrified apartment building in the middle of the financial district and just so happen to be African American, and they work somewhere in one of these tall buildings to give up this and move to Alabama. It would take just a little bit more. Now, when you look at the globe, I think this is, once again, this is what California and that little part of Los Angeles looks like from a globe. Remember, we are part of a broader global community. And when you're talking to somebody who may have global connections, influence, and impact, just remember that we're thinking about it in a broader sense than just one individual household and the benefits of those households that may be suffering from, unemployment or welfare or whatever it might be. So again, I show you that it's bigger than just that one small space. It took a hell of a lot for us to develop an economy that looks like this, and for us to cross Death Valley and go across the world back is going to take a hell of a spell. All right, so that's how I look at the maps. That's my information that I wanted to bring. I am about to go join Brother Macon. On, I think it's Brother Macon still there? Nah, he's gone. Damn it. I was going to say join him on his live. I don't know if he's going to be on Brother Macon, George Macon 2 channel or the Urban Nerds channel. But if you subscribe, then you should see the notification. And if you don't get that notification, just remember that we're out there. You can look us up, George Macon. I'm going to be joining him for a conversation that's a little bit lighter than this one. But again, shout out to, what was this guy's name? Ray Alexander for sending me that content. I will be reaching out to him to have the conversation one-on-one, and then to actually put my real rebuttals out there. But peace, Black first. Continue to keep it lit. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm out.